20 years ago, in 1997, a guy named Dave Pilkey made a crude drawing of a fat guy wearing nothing but a cape and some underpants. A character so grand obviously deserved an iconic name, so Pilkey did right by his drawing and named it Captain Underpants. Since then, this scantily clad, in the worst way, hero has sold over 70 million books worldwide, and the series has made children from all over the world giggle incessantly with its unrepentant toilet humor. And this June, DreamWorks will be diving into the superhero movie genre with their epic underwear. I'm sorry, there's no way to make Captain Underpants sound cool. But then again, that's kind of the point. He's a bumbling, overly optimistic goof that was only hypnotized into believing he was a superhero rather than, you know, actually being one. But this got me thinking, what's going on here? How do our heroes hypnotize their stern principal into becoming the polar opposite of his normal self? And more importantly, is it possible to change someone's core personality through hypnosis? So firstly, let's establish the chain of events in Captain Underpants. And from there, I'm gonna decide on the best way to talk about this sort of thing. In the upcoming film, the troublemaking elementary school pranksters George and Harold finally go a little too far with their shenanigans, and naturally, their cruel and mean-spirited principal, Mr. Krupp, is like 1000% done with them. The details in the book are pretty different, but the movie doesn't seem all that concerned with accurately portraying the expansive lore of Captain Underpants. Anyway, George and Harold, in an act of desperation, choose to hypnotize their principal so that he can be a little less uptight, and also to get themselves out of trouble in the process. But as it turns out, their plan works a little too well, and Krupp falls into a trance, leaving himself fully susceptible to the control of George and Harold. And because they're goofsters, they decide, as a goof, to make Mr. Krupp believe that he is actually the comic book superhero of George and Harold's creation, Captain Underpants. While it's funny at first, the plan eventually backfires as Captain Underpants dashes out the window to fight crime, even though he possesses no actual superpowers. So what this, I guess it's a classic now. Oh my god, I'm so old. What this classic children's book series is telling us is that the best way to manipulate someone is to hypnotize them. Because then they'll just do whatever you command with no repercussions. Apart from, you know, thrilling superhero stories and stuff. But if that's the case, how come we don't see more hypno crimes occurring? Why aren't there more magicians and mentalists out there living large? All they'd have to do is just hypnotize some security guards, some bank tellers, some, I don't know, monarchs, to just give them all of their money. They wouldn't even remember it happening. It's the perfect crime. But of course, while Captain Underpants is a series of children's books and hopefully a good film, it clearly takes some pretty wild liberties with the concept of hypnosis, as do most everything that has ever tried to portray hypnosis. A lot of the time when the concept arises, there's usually an effort to make the whole notion of hypnosis a lot sexier than it actually is. If all of your knowledge of hypnosis came from TV and movies, you'd probably think hypnosis was some sort of mind control superpower, which it's not. It would be cool if it was, but it's not. But that doesn't mean that Captain Underpants has nothing worth examining. And there's probably a better way I could have worded that. In fact, there is a valid question we can take a look at here. Anyone who's ever seen a stage hypnosis act featuring a mentalist will probably swear that hypnosis totally works and makes people do the most ridiculous things. And yeah, they do. It's amazing what some people will do when they're under a trance in a show like that. To bring this back to Captain Underpants, these two concepts are actually pretty similar. Mr. Krupp, who actively hates things like fun and children and fun, does this complete 180 and becomes the most out-of-control, fun-loving, hyperactive person on the planet. Not unlike how seemingly normal people will do the most ridiculous things during a live hypnosis demonstration. So do we have a strong foothold to say that you could legitimately hypnotize someone in a way that changes their personality? Or make them actually think that they could be a superhero? So obviously we're going to take this in a bit of a different direction than the movie does. Based on the trailer, there's some pretty wild stuff that goes on when Mr. Krupp is hypnotized, and it looks an awful lot like some sort of magic business. Now, if I were a betting man, I would say that this is going to have some sort of massive impact on the movie's plot. Mostly, how come George's 3D hypno ring has been imbued with magic powers? So putting things like magic aside, let's take a look at how hypnosis actually works. Once we've got that sorted, maybe you'll agree with me on the conclusion that I've come to, which is that Mr. Krupp was probably more of a weirdo than we thought, even before he was Captain Underpants. As said before, hypnosis is a little different than what Hollywood would have us believe. You don't need a weird mustache or a pendulum in order to hypnotize someone. Although, a tangible focal point, like a pendulum for the subject, certainly helps. In fact, it's actually a lot easier to be hypnotized than these works would have you think. Moreover, it's incredibly likely that you've actually been hypnotized before without even knowing it. As for who hypnotized you, it was probably yourself, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We've mentioned a few times already the application of stage hypnosis, but hypnosis also has roots in far more avenues than just entertainment. It actually has a basis in a surprisingly wide variety of medical fields. It also has a long and storied history as a therapeutic tool, the practice of which is of course called hypnotherapy. So this isn't all just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Can we bring mumbo jumbo back? I really like that term. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, it's important to note that hypnosis has a lot less to do with mind control and a lot more to do with suggestion and susceptibility. Being actively hypnotized requires investment from the hypnotizee to work with the person doing the hypnotizing. In short, when being hypnotized by another person, the one falling into a trance has to want to fall into a trance. Believe it or not, it's remarkably easy to maintain control of your conscious mind. You're doing it right now. It's so easy, you didn't even know you were doing it. Venturing back to the world of stage hypnosis, if you've ever seen an act like this, you might notice that the performer will usually grab a whole bunch of people from the audience, and then while they're in the process of putting everyone into their trance, they might start to send people back into the crowd. This is either because the entertainer just doesn't think that that person's going to provide the amount of entertainment that they want, or because the person on stage just wasn't in the right headspace and wasn't opening themselves up to the performer's suggestions. And because this is a necessary component in active hypnosis, some people just can't really be willfully hypnotized. To relate this back to Captain Underpants, Mr. Krupp was very clearly able to be hypnotized. After all, it's a major plot element. So this would mean that at the time George threatens to hypnotize Krupp, Krupp doesn't really see it as a threat and then actually willfully opens himself up to being hypnotized by George. Now, why he would do this, I have no idea. Maybe he just didn't believe George and wanted to prove him wrong. Maybe he just wanted to laugh at George's expense. But since he actually did fall under a trance, we know that Krupp was complacent in his transformation to Captain Underpants. As for the actual state of hypnosis itself, there's been a ton of debate about its true nature over the years. But there's no denying that hypnosis is a real observable thing. But because it's about our own brain, there are obviously a lot of unanswered questions about it. However, some lines of thinking about hypnosis have become more accepted than others over the years. One of the most widely accepted explanations of hypnosis is that you're entering a state of intense relaxation. And rather than completely surrendering your self-awareness, you actually enter a heightened state of awareness and concentration, paying less attention to the stuff in your peripherals. But the trick is that through the relaxation techniques you're put through beforehand, it's not the conscious mind that's entering this state of concentration. Rather, it's your subconscious. What's the difference? Well, if you're watching this video right now and processing everything I'm telling you, that's your conscious mind at work. It's analytical. It's your internal monologue. It's what takes in and interprets all of the stimuli that you encounter in your day-to-day life. Your subconscious is the one that's doing all of the processing behind the scenes and also keeping your body, running. Things like your heartbeat, your blinking, your breathing, all that good stuff that I just reminded your conscious mind about. You're welcome. The subconscious is also the part of the mind that holds things like memories. And one of the most widely accepted explanations of hypnosis is that it's bringing the subconscious to the forefront since it's much more susceptible to suggestion. And that might still sound to you like some spooky mind control stuff, but let me ask you something. Have you ever been doing a menial task or playing a video game and then gotten this feeling where your vision blurs and you feel like you've stopped paying attention to what you're doing? To you, there's no longer anything in your hands and everything you're doing just sort of blends together and you just simply are? That feeling, believe it or not, is actually the result of you putting yourself under a small hypnotic trance. I mean, think about it. If you're, say, playing a game and then you enter this state, most people will actually end up playing a lot better than if they were consciously thinking about it. If you had actually stopped paying attention to what you were doing, wouldn't you start to suck at it? In this state of heightened attention, your subconscious mind takes over, as what you're doing has probably become second nature, like muscle memory for the brain. But here's the thing with the subconscious mind. It might be more open and susceptible to suggestion, but it isn't stupid. Above all else, the subconscious mind is always looking out for number one. After all, it's still you in control, and you can only be as hypnotized as you want to be. Even if you're under a hypnotic trance, the mind isn't going to put you in any danger or make you do something that compromises compromises your morals. This is why, in practices like hypnotherapy, anecdotal evidence has shown that while hypnosis can be useful in helping to do positive things like quitting smoking, there's far less evidence to support someone being hypnotized into believing something dangerous, like believing that they're a world-class hitman, or a superhero for that matter. But basically, while the hypnotic trance does lower your inhibitions, the subconscious won't force you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do. You know, like something that would put itself in just as much danger as you. Self-preservation, it's a pretty important thing. Now right now, I'm going to use my actual mind-reading powers and tell you what you're thinking. What about in the case of stage hypnosis where the subject is made to, I don't know, act like a variety of barn animals? Well, you could just assume that most people are weird, because we are, but there's actually a more sensible theory. And this is that the subconscious mind, despite what I just said, is sort of pressured into it. Now, this probably wouldn't work on somebody who wouldn't already act silly in front of an audience, but the subconscious combines things like the societal pressure of you being on a stage, along with the willingness to be hypnotized, and it comes to the conclusion that you should just play along with the performer because that's how it's supposed to go, right? It's almost like there's a placebo effect mixed in with all of this as well. Though that pressure to play along would probably cease if the performer was like, okay, that's enough pretending to be a cow. Okay, next, I want you to go murder that guy over there. Okay, so what does any of this have to do with Mr. Krupp and Captain Underpants? Well, it raises a lot of questions about Krupp. Firstly, we already know that he was more than open to being hypnotized by George. But based on the results of that hypnosis, again, magic aside, it's a very interesting result that gives us some insight into Mr. Krupp's mind. First of all, we can infer that Krupp already has an extensive knowledge of who Captain Underpants is. While he's definitely seen the hero on the cover of George and Harold's comic, it's unclear if he's actually read it. That is, until he transforms and uses Captain Underpants' trademark war cry. Tra-la-la! I never understood how to say that as a kid, and now that the trailers come out, I still don't understand. Anyway, when it comes to hypnosis, while the subconscious is incredibly susceptible to creating false memories given the right stimulus, it can't just give you accurate information that you were unaware of. Being hypnotized doesn't make you Neo from the Matrix, just able to learn Kung Fu with the snap of your fingers. So if Mr. Krupp, while under this hypnotic suggestion, knew specific details about Captain Underpants, it would suggest that he's read it before. And this actually makes sense, since in the book, George and Harold were distributing copies of their comic to everyone. So the principal was probably able to get his hands on one as well. But if he's acting like Captain Underpants while under this trance, that means that not only has Krupp read Captain Underpants, but he's also thought, at least on a subconscious level, that he wants to be Captain Underpants. Not only that, but also that fighting crime despite having no superpowers is also a safe and reasonable decision to make. With all of this in mind, it makes you wonder how Krupp's subconscious is able to handle anything when he's not under a trance. I mean, the subconscious is definitely unreliable when it comes to analytical thinking, and it does make mistakes, but this is like a whole other level, dude. And it's not like he's in front of an audience, so he's not being pressured to entertain. This is the pure, unfiltered Mr. Krupp. Could it be that Captain Underpants is actually the story of a man so broken and dead inside that he unwittingly uses the opportunity of being hypnotized to cut loose and be the person he's always wanted to be? I honestly can't tell if that would make the movie more uplifting or sadder. So after looking more closely at the concept of hypnosis, can we say it's possible for someone to have a sudden change of heart through the practice? Well, no, not particularly. But because of this, it has brought us to some eye-opening conclusions about the mean-spirited, child-hating Mr. Krupp. So all in all, on the plausibility meter, I'm going to rate the idea that you can fundamentally change someone's personality through hypnosis 0 underpants out of 5. But I'm also going to rate the plausibility of Mr. Krupp being a complete incompetent weirdo even before he was Captain Underpants 5 underpants out of 5. But what do you think? Have you ever been hypnotized before, whether it was in therapy, as part of a show, or just by yourself? What was the experience like? Are you excited for the Captain Underpants film? Myself, I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I'm just hoping that the movie can live up to its gorgeous animation. Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments, and also be sure to let us know any conspiracies you'd like us to take a look at in the future. Until then, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Channel Frederator if this is your first time here, and don't forget to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button to become part of our notification squad. And once you've done all of that, remember, Frederator loves you.